All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of Justin and Donald Save America. As always, I am your host, Donald Kendal, joined by the aforementioned Justin. How's it going, Justin?
I have a last name.
Haskins.
Thank you. Somebody keeps emailing me and calling me Justin Hawkins. And this is not a person. This is not a person who doesn't like me. This is a person who likes me. But they keep calling me Justin Hawkins, and it's driving me insane, literally driving me insane.
Well, we're going to be talking about the Great Reset, the Great Reset book, which just recently went up for sale. And we're going to be talking about a new poll that was commissioned by the Heartland Institute through Rasmussen that explored a number of things. But the thing that we're going to talk about is the crazy COVID restrictions that's a outsized number of Democrats support. So we're going to talk about all of that on this episode of Justin and Donald Save America. But before we dive into either of those topics, I always have to put out that call there that if you want to support content like this, you can, free of charge, just by hitting the like button, leaving a comment, sharing this content, being a subscriber to the channel, all things that cost absolutely nothing but help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent shows like this from reaching more viewers. Justin, big news, obviously. Well, first off, should we clear the air when it comes to why we haven't put out an episode in a couple of weeks?
I don't know. I don't know what you're going to tell the audience. What do you...
Well, we both got COVID.
Try to blame it on me? Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
we did.
Right after the holidays, both of us got COVID. Me and then Justin, like about a week later. So we were both recovering from that. It was fine. It wasn't a big deal. But
yeah, we lived.
We lived. And then obviously the Great Reset book, which just released a week and a half ago, that took Justin out of commission because he was down in Dallas at the Blaze Studios doing a whole bunch of promotional stuff for that, interviews. He was on Glenn Beck's show for like an entire week. So that kind of prevented us from doing a show as well. Bigger fish to fry, I guess. He was big timing us over here.
That's true. I was big timing you. And for those of you who have not already went out and purchased the book, The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of 21st Century Fascism by Glenn Beck and Justin Haskins. There it is on Amazon.com. Good luck finding a copy.
Yeah.
Should have thought ahead of time. Should have bought it ahead of time. It's totally sold out all across America. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, we should kind of get into that because obviously this is the big story.
Yeah.
We might do like a little bit more detailed account of just us and working with Glenn Beck on this book and all the process that went behind that and why it took, a year and a half, et cetera, et cetera. But that's probably for a future episode.
Yeah.
But just a little bit behind the scenes, I will say that, Justin and I, we're foreign to this. It's not like we're over here writing books like this or contributing to books like this on a weekly basis or anything. So we didn't know what to expect when this book was coming out. I think I had fairly reasonable expectations of how well this would perform and all of this, but it far exceeded my expectations. I could probably say, correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, that the how well this book has done in sales has far exceeded Justin's expectations. And
no, it's actually not performed up to my very high standards.
And I think it's also blown past Glenn Beck's expectations.
Yeah.
So I think we should just kind of get into all of this and over the days that the book came out, just the news that we came across and just our reactions to it. But that might be a good way to kind of start the show.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think we should do an in-depth sort of here was our experience with this book because it was really interesting. This is our second book that we've worked with Glenn Beck on. We also did Arguing with Socialists, as many of you know, who followed us over from Stopping Socialism TV. If you're not a subscriber of that, by the way, on YouTube, go over there and subscribe to Stopping Socialism TV. We have great content over there. It's mostly a socialism-focused channel, but we've got a whole bunch of videos on the Great Reset. It's really where we started diving into this stuff over on that channel. But I do think that, it is incredible the reaction that we've seen for this book so far. As you pointed out, I think Glenn I think everyone was surprised by everyone knew it was going to do well. Nobody thought, oh, this book's going to bomb, and then it surprised everyone. We all thought it was going to do well.
Sure.
We all thought it would be on the New York Times bestseller list. That hasn't come out yet, but we all expected that. But did we think that it would be the #1 book in America when it launched? No. Did we think that it would sell out every single copy, the print version, every single copy on day one? No, I don't think we thought that. Did we think that Amazon would pull the ability to order copies of the book offline because there were too many back orders?
Right.
More than 30,000 back orders of this book right now. And so they can't even fulfill it. So they said, you guys have so many back orders that you can't fulfill because we're just waiting for the books to be printed at the printer that we're not even going to let people order it anymore. No. we didn't think that either.
So I was tuning in. This was on Tuesday. The book was released on Tuesday, right? I was tuning into Glenn Beck's show. You were going to be on, and this is like the morning, right? He records it at what, like 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, something like that.
8 Central Time, 9
8 Central Time. And he says during it, this is like his first commercial break, so only like 15 minutes into the show, half hour into the show. He says that he just got word that they sold through 30% of the stock, that that they had in stock at Amazon. And I thought, like, okay, that's a really good start. Again, I have no sense of relativity when it comes to any of this. So I thought, okay, that's great. So then, Justin, you call me later, I think early the next day, and you were talking to someone high up at the Blaze who was congratulating you on the book's release. And you're like, oh, yeah, I saw that it was #1 on Amazon. And the gentleman I'm referring to says, oh, #1. Yeah, it's #1. But we sold out. They sold out on Amazon.
Yeah.
Like, what? So we go to Amazon, see if we can order a copy. It says that they can't ship one immediately and that they'll basically ship one when they have one in stock. And this is on one day after it came out. Sold out on Amazon. Sold out. So then we're like, what does that mean? How many copies did they have on Amazon? So, Justin, you went and started asking people around the Blaze Studios. Yeah. I started combing through Glenn Beck's social media, and I found a Instagram post that I literally want to print out and frame because it says this. This is Glenn Beck's official Instagram account. It says, "The Great Reset has hit a nerve. I just received a call a few minutes ago. This is turning out to be the biggest book of my career. Yesterday alone, Amazon sold 75,000 copies. We are struggling now as just yesterday we have gone through the first printing. Second edition is going to the press today, ... Hopefully. Order it right now, Kindle version, blah, 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 blah." So, yeah, Glenn Beck talking about how this is turning out to be the biggest book of his career. This isn't the biggest book of my career or your career. It is. But saying that means nothing. Saying that means nothing. Saying it about Glenn Beck means so much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty incredible. Glenn's told me that the last time he had a book sell even in the same neighborhood as this on day one, first couple of days of sales, was a book that he wrote in 2009 called Common Sense, which was back when he was on Fox News. And, that was 2009 it was, I think, midway through 2009. So that's like halfway through Obama's first year in office. It's kind of the beginning of the Tea Party era. All that stuff was getting rolling. They were pushing for Obamacare and all this stuff. And people were really fired up about that. And that was, over a decade ago. Now, Glenn Beck is, if he's not the Michael Jordan of conservative book sales, he's pretty close to it. He's in the top 5. He's at least the Scottie Pippen. I mean, the guy has 21 New York Times bestsellers. 21 New York Times bestsellers. I mean, that's unheard of that you have that many, including a bunch of #1 New York Times bestsellers. But for this to be the biggest title he's had at launch in his career is really saying something. And I think he's exactly right. It's not just about, book sales. This is about, it's this idea is resonating with people. Yeah. People are genuinely worried about this. They want to understand why the world around them seems to be so dramatically changing. And this book explains it. It's an incredibly unique book. There's nothing out there that really tells this story in this way.
Yeah,
There
well,
really isn't.
I mean, that was one of the reasons why I kind of had, I guess, more conservative expectations for how well this book was going to do, because, you know, like you mentioned, we worked with Glenn on Arguing with Socialists, and that did really well, but I don't think it did anywhere near what this book is doing.
That book debuted number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list.
Right. And to me, it's like that book, which I think is probably sitting behind me here. Yeah, this one, right? It's like clearly Glenn Beck. It's got the little cartoon characters of Bernie Sanders and AOC and Elizabeth Warren on there, and it's just like this is like the conservative equivalent to like candy. It's just it's nice and easily consumable, and you could just open up to any page and find a little section and just read it, right? And I thought maybe this was going to be a little bit more cerebral, a little bit more dense and complex of a concept. Even when you hear us talking about it, it's like we have to kind of figure out ways to put it into layman's terms, because some of the concepts are really dense. So I thought, in comparison to Arguing with Socialists, this one wasn't going to do quite as good. Little do I know. I guess I don't know anything.
Yeah, I mean,
doing bonkers.
The thing is, it is really it is a super complicated thing, and sometimes people, when they're confronted with that, they get really overwhelmed and they draw back a little bit, and they're not as excited about it. And so, one of the challenges that Glenn and the two of us had when we were working on this book is trying to figure out a way to make this engaging and entertaining, but also to explain something that is very complex in a way that is not hard for people to grasp. And the thing is, it's not as complex as the details are complex, and you're not going to stumble upon this information somewhere. It's not you're going to just be browsing the internet one day, or you're looking at your phone, and then stories are going to pop up, and it's going to be like, oh, here's how the Great Reset works, and here's how ESG scores work. Like, that's not ever going to happen. You have to piece all these things together. Right? We've talked about this a million times, right? The Great Reset is a million puzzle pieces.
Right.
And you only really understand exactly what it is when you piece everything together and you can look at that big picture. But the big picture is actually not hard to understand once you have it.
Right.
It's pretty straightforward. Elites want to centralize power and control, and they're getting super wealthy in the process. And they've created this elaborate Ponzi scheme that helps them become very wealthy and powerful. And it is incredibly interesting. The quotes that are in this book are unbelievable. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of citations. I think Glenn said there's like 50 pages of citations in here. I mean, if you wanted to go even deeper than this book, you could, based on just the citations alone. It's incredibly interesting. And I think I was a little surprised too. I was a little worried too that people might be intimidated by it, or think that it's just a conspiracy theory and stay away from it for that reason. Was the other thing I was worried about. But the thing that I think what we've seen is that people are hungry for something that they want to learn something new, and they want to understand what's going on in their world and why things are so crazy right now. And they've been grasping for answers, and they get little pieces of it. And when they watch the news, when they watch cable news, when they listen to talk radio, they get pieces. They get little pieces, but it doesn't really make sense still. Why is all this stuff happening together? Why does it all seem to be happening at the same time? Why? And this does tie everything together. And it does it in a way that clearly delineates what we know from what we think is true, but we're not 100% sure.
What we suspect.
Suspect. And we get rid of all the conspiracy theory stuff, because there is a lot of conspiracy theory stuff surrounding the Great Reset that isn't true. And so, or that we don't have any evidence for. And so we try really hard to get rid of all that stuff, give you the facts, give you the details, give you direct quotes, give you the data directly from original sources, and do it in an entertaining way.
Right. And
piece all these puzzle pieces together so you understand the full story. And so I don't think anyone can read this book from beginning to end who has any interest in this, in politics, policy, anything, or just wants to know what's going on in their world. I don't think it's possible to read this book from beginning to end and not be at least a little entertained. You're going to be entertained and learn something new. You are definitely going to learn something new. It is not possible that you know everything that's in this book. I just don't believe it. If you tell me, oh yeah, I knew all that, you're a liar. You are a filthy liar if you say that, because there is no way. There's no way.
Yeah.
There were so many times you and I were working on this, and Glenn too, and we would be like, what? Like,
the amount of
is that
times,
true?
the amount of lists that we had between us three of just stuff that like throughout like a week or a month, where it's just like, well, that needs to be added to the book. Well, that needs to be added to the book. That happened like literally 4 times, at least. So it was
and the book was rewritten. The book was rewritten about 3 times fully. And there were about 6 or 7 drafts of the book.
Yeah.
And there were chapters in the original version that we deleted.
And there was an awesome 4 horsemen concept that totally got scrapped. But
there was an awesome 4 horsemen.
I cried myself to sleep over that.
That's not a joke. That's a real thing. It was part of the original book. It was really cool, and we ended up scrapping it. The book started out being not nearly as serious as it ended up being, but anyway.
That's true.
It's an amazing book. If you want to get a copy of it, you can still order copies of the print version through other retailers, not Amazon, and be on the wait list to get the book. I urge you to do that before those back orders run out too. And you can get the Kindle version right now if you're willing to read it digitally. You can get the full book anytime.
And he's in the process of producing an audiobook version too. But,
and Glenn is in the process of getting an audiobook going, and that should be ready sometime soon.
When we talked about this book coming out a couple of weeks ago, I had mentioned how like he's trying to really get people to pre-order this because, you know, the supply chain issues and all of that, you know, and again, and I think I even said, like, I don't know if this is just kind of like a marketing thing, like whatever. But like, nope, that turns out to be exactly the case, because now if you try to order a copy on Amazon, or at least you did a couple of days ago, it would say that it would be like March 15th before you got one. But he was encouraging people to do that so that we would know how many more need to be printed in this second run, you know, gauged on how many, you know, oversell orders there are. But then, Justin, you told me yesterday that Amazon stopped selling it, stopped taking these pre-orders because it went past a threshold where they cut off the sales of this book when they don't have anything in stock. Right. So as far as we know, there are north of 30,000 oversold pre-orders.
There's at least, as of Friday, I was told there were 30,000. Amazon, we're not talking about all pre-orders from all retailers, just from Amazon. There were 30,000 back-ordered copies of this book,
waiting for the second edition.
And then it sold more on Saturday and Sunday. And then at some point, either late Sunday night or Monday, they stopped allowing it because they hit the threshold of allowable back orders. So I don't even know still how many back orders there are or how long we're going to be waiting for this. People might have to wait a month or more before they get a copy.
I say, and Justin, you were looking up our zip codes and seeing if there was any books available in any of the retailer stores around here. But that is still an option theoretically. So if you have not gotten a book, if you can't pre-order it, or, you know, it's not pre-order, but for the second run on Amazon anymore, I would still say, like, go and check out whether it's a Barnes and Noble, some type of local bookstore, or even like a Target or anyone that sells books. And there might be a copy or two still sitting on the shelf, but that might be your best opportunity to get it in the short term. But
I checked Barnes and Noble for where I live, and there are literally 0 copies available for Barnes and Noble within 100 miles of my house. And we did your house, and there was 1.
That was 2 hours away.
It was 84 miles away from your house. So
this is obviously a topic that we're going to continue to cover on this channel and on this show. We've got some things we're keeping an eye on. I'll say I won't reveal too much about our future plans with all of this, but this book is going to be a cornerstone of stuff that we are going to cover over the next several months, if not years. So to be able to kind of stay on track with what we're saying on any given episode, you pretty much need this. This is instrumental knowledge that you're going to need to kind of stay up to date on everything that we're talking about on here. So if you haven't gotten a copy, try to track one down, or you might be waiting a month and a half for another one. But any last words you want to say about this, or should we move on to our next topic?
Nope. I think we're good.
All right. Fantastic. Enough tooting our own horn on that one. Let's move on to our next topic. So another thing that's been keeping us super busy over the last week and a half here is Justin and I, through the Heartland Institute, through the Stopping Socialism Project here at the Heartland Institute, occasionally we'll commission a poll through Rasmussen. And so we did that just at the beginning of this year. We just got the results back last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't know. But the results were crazy. So I'm going to pull these things up here. But basically, we covered a handful of things. One, we did some like head-to-head matchups between people's sentiments when it comes to Donald Trump versus Biden. If they were against each other in the election, who are you going to vote for? So those are some pretty interesting results that you can check out if you go to stoppingsocialism.com. I know there's an article about it. You could also go to heartland.org and find some info about that stuff. But what I want to spend the rest of this episode talking about is our second section of questions, which all had to do with COVID and kind of authoritarian tendencies affiliated with whatever party that you're with. So I'm going to pull this up here, but Justin, if you want to give a little insight into how we started developing these questions, I think that would pretty.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't been following us for too long, we do a few of these polls every year. Donnie and I write them, and Rasmussen usually runs them just as we write them. They like the stuff we come up with. What we try to do is do some non-traditional polling.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, we try to come up with topics and questions and find angles and opinions that pollsters are normally not asking for, but they probably should be asking for. And so we started out this poll. The two big things we were interested in is we wanted to ask questions that were about the Great Reset, since we had the book coming out, and we asked some questions about that a year ago, and we wanted to kind of see how that shaped up, and things related to the Great Reset. So the role of international institutions and their impact on regulations for businesses, and woke corporatism and stuff like that. What should the highest priority be for businesses? But the most interesting thing, we asked, Donnie said the Trump Biden stuff, but the really, really, really interesting thing, the thing that we were very excited about this time, was we wanted to know what Americans think about the unvaccinated. And by unvaccinated, I mean not fully vaccinated from COVID-19. And to what extent would people be willing to go to coerce those people to get vaccinated, punish those people for not getting vaccinated, ostracize them, get rid of their rights? How far would it go? And is there some sort of associated party affiliation with groups that are more likely to be authoritarian, as we would see it, or less likely to be authoritarian? Now, we had our theories going into it, right? I mean, we were suspicious of certain things. We thought for sure that we were on the right track. We had hypotheses. That's true. And the results we got back were incredible. They were incredibly interesting.
One other thing, because we had done a poll on authoritarian tendencies, and we kind of cross-referenced it with socialism. That was one of the first polls that we ever did. So this time we're like thinking, okay, we'll kind of do that same thing with, like, for example,
we asked people what their opinion was of socialism or capitalism, right?
Yeah.
And then we would ask them questions like, do you want to fine people for saying speech that you think is offensive? Right. That kind of thing.
Yeah. So then this time we're like, let's focus on all COVID and authoritarianism around COVID. And I think the Biden vaccine mandate was like the first starting point. And then as we were developing the questions, we're like, let's just see how far we can push this. Let's come up with the craziest stuff possible and see how many people say, yes, I'm in favor of that. So that's kind of the genesis behind all of this. So without further ado, let's see some of the results. So Justin, I'm just going to kind of read through these. If you want to jump in and interject at any point, feel free.
Well, so I think that we should, go straight to the party affiliations.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah,
but
okay.
But I will say it's weird because we've been tracking, how much attention this has been getting in the press and different shows and stuff, and there is a kind of a common trend that I see where people like focus on a couple of them And then like they'll either briefly mention some of the more extreme ones or completely ignore it. And I wonder if it's just because it's so crazy they don't believe it. Like even people on our side of the aisle don't believe some of these results. So just kind of keep that in mind as I kind of get into some of this. So so the first question has to do with do you favor President Biden's plan to impose a COVID-19 vaccine mandate on employers of large blah 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 blah. So when it comes to our Democratic voters, we have a 79% that is in favor of that, compared to just 22% of their Republican counterparts. So nothing too crazy there. That was fully in line with our expectations. Question 2, would you support a proposal for federal or state governments to fine Americans who choose not to get a vaccine? So Republicans, 19%. I want to speak to each and every one of you. I don't understand why you guys are okay with that. Our Democrat counterpoint, though, 55%. So over half of Democrats, according to this poll, are in favor of fining people who choose not to get vaccinated.
Yep.
Next question. Would you support a proposal to limit the spread of COVID by having federal or state governments require that citizens remain confined to their homes at all times except for emergencies if they refuse to get a COVID-19 vaccine? Democrat respondents, 58%, largely over the 50% mark there. 58% compared to 17% of their Republican counterparts.
And what is that, 24 something for independence?
What other here? Yeah, it's about 25%. All right, next question. Would you favor a proposal to help limit the spread of coronavirus by having federal or state governments require that citizens temporarily live in designated facilities or locations if they refuse to get the COVID-19 vaccine? So this one is like where it starts to get a little bit crazier, although this is something that is happening in Australia. So it's not way outside the, scope of possibility. Democrats, 44% are in favor of interning the non-vaccinated. Next question. Would you be in favor of a proposal for federal or state governments to fine or imprison individuals who publicly question the efficacy of existing COVID-19 vaccines on social media, television, radio, or in online or digital publications? Fining or imprisoning people for questioning the efficacy of vaccines. Questioning it. 48% of Democrats, nearly half of Democrats. That one blows my mind.
That one is actually one that does not get a lot of attention. That's one of the ones that does not. The confining people to their homes or having, forcing people into some sort of designated facility or something. Those seem to be getting a lot of the attention. That one does not get a ton of attention, although there are some people who focus on it. But that one to me is actually, in a way, the most authoritarian of them all, because it's not a question of safety. I mean, literally, all the other ones, they're going to write off. A Democrat, if you were to ask one of these Democrats who said, yep, confine them to their homes, or yep, fine them money for not getting vaxxed, or, whatever, right? They would say, well, yeah, because they're a danger to society. When they go out into society, they could infect people. That's the argument.
Ideas and thoughts are dangerous, Justin.
This is
the line that we're crossing here.
That's the part that's so crazy is you could be a fully vaxxed person saying these things, just saying, I'm not sure that the vax works all that well. And that would be enough for them to say, nope, we should not just kick them off of social media. That'd be one thing. They're saying, we're going to fine you or imprison you.
Yeah.
Fine you or imprison you for saying that. That to me is
that one
crazy.
Insane.
That's crazy.
We got a couple more here. Next one. Would you support a proposal for state and federal or state governments to require unvaccinated citizens to use a smartphone app or wearable device that tracks unvaccinated people to ensure that they are quarantined or socially distancing from others? Our Democratic friends, 48% are in favor of this. Almost half of all of these things that we've listed off so far, nearly half of Democrats have signaled strong or somewhat, favoring these proposals. And then this one, I have to kind of be careful about what I say, because it's disgusting. And I don't even know how people would react if this proposal was seriously floated. But regardless, so the question is, would you favor
this was, by the way, this was the one that we were like, well, what would be like let's come up with something really crazy.
Yeah.
That was, and you were like, no, I've got an idea. Like, why don't we do this?
Yeah.
And this is what we came up with as sort of our craziest end of the spectrum.
Right. The question is, would you support a proposal to temporarily remove parents' custody of their children if the parents refuse to take the COVID-19 vaccine? Would you support taking kids away from people if they refuse to get the vaccine? Right? This should be zeros across the board. Democrats, 28%. It's shocking. Nearly a third. We're in the ballpark of a third of Democrats are in favor of a proposal to take people's kids away because they have the audacity to get the COVID-19 vaccine.
I think actually, if you look at if you do the demographics there by age, go to 18 to 39.
Oh, 31%.
31%. So actually, one of the best predictors of that is your age. So if you're 18 to 39 years old, 31% of 18 to 39-year-old, and this is voters, by the way. Rasmussen does likely voters. They don't do just general population people. They don't just ask people who are registered to vote. You have to actually say you're likely to vote for them to count you in the results. So normally these kinds of things get worse when you start peeling back, because voters tend to be the ones who are more informed. They tend to, on average, be the more informed part of America, the demographic. They tend to be following these debates and policy more closely than people who don't vote. And so it might even be crazier than this if you're just looking at general population. Just what's the average American walking down the street who may or may not be a voter? What do they think?
Yeah.
But when you see 31% of people 18 to 39 say, yeah, take away their kids, they won't get vaccinated, take them away. I mean, that is absolutely insane.
This is pretty interesting change here. If you look at the men versus women column, it's very similar with the exception of the strongly favor, where it's 2-1 men over women. So this could be one of those things that women are like, absolutely not. This is the line. Don't mess with my kids type of thing.
Yep.
So that's kind of interesting. And also with the age groups. So yeah, you're right. With the 18 to 39 is 31%. And then the next, age groups up are like nowhere even close to that, either of them. So the only people seemingly in favor of this are men in the age group of 18 to 39. So
yeah, it's a third. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, when you're looking at those numbers, 18 to 39, 3 times more likely than 40 to 64, and 4 times more likely than 65 plus to answer yes to that question. So it really is a significant difference between that. And when you look at other demographics, it's not really true. If you look at although the things that you would expect, there are things there. Look at the married with children. Is that a factor? We have one of our crosstabs was we asked people if they were what their marital status was.
Yeah.
And it looks like married with no children living at home, 888. What is that one that says 16?
One, not married with children living at home, 16% strongly favor taking kids away.
So we're supposed to believe that
that might be a small test.
Yeah, it probably is.
Case, so I don't want to read too much into that. But
that's a good point. Good point.
But
yeah, you got to be careful with crosstabs on polls because your sample sizes get smaller and smaller and smaller, and so that means if you only have 20 people that answer fall into a certain category, and 5 of them say, that's not a lot of people out of 1,000, but out of 20 it is. So the percentages are going to look high. So you got to be careful with that when you're looking at these polls.
Yeah. So, these polls came out, they were released. The set of results were released just last week, right? Mid last week, I think. And a lot of coverage, man, a lot of coverage. I watched Steven Crowder talking about this. I saw Tim Pool talking about this. Eric July was talking about this. Ron Paul was talking about this. There's articles on Breitbart, Washington Times, Washington Examiner, Town Hall, you name it. There was probably an article talking about this. So, I mean, other than this just being like crazy and hey, look at this, what do you think is like the most important kind of takeaway from these poll results, Justin?
I think the most important takeaway is that, there really is a streak in COVID. I don't know if this I actually don't think COVID caused this. I think there was always a streak in a large segment of Americans that really wanted, it's probably only like a quarter of Americans, but when you're looking at voters and you're looking at Democrats and all this stuff, it ends up being a pretty large segment of the Democratic Party that has a significant authoritarian. I mean, I know that's kind of a harsh word to use here, but when you're talking about taking people's children away from them or imprisoning people for saying something you don't like publicly, I mean, what else can you call that? There is a significant streak in a large segment of America that is very authoritarian and that does not care about civil liberties so long as the cause is deemed to be good and in the benefit of the collective, right? And if it's good for the collective, then we can do just about anything to you it's justified, because as long as it's helping the majority of people, you don't really have any rights. And I'm not saying most Americans believe that. I don't think that most Americans do. In fact, one of the positive things that came out of this poll was that independents pretty much soundly rejected most of the things that we asked here. A majority of independents said no to just about everything. They were much closer to Republicans than to Democrats on most of these questions. There were 1 or 2 exceptions on the vax mandate and stuff like that, Biden's vax mandate. But for the most part, they agreed with Republicans. They were much closer to them than to Democrats. They do not want a sort of authoritarian. So and even half of Democrats didn't want it, right? So we're talking about half the Democrat Party is become extremely radical and authoritarian. And I'm not exactly sure when that happened, but it's clearly a problem. And we can't ignore it and pretend like, oh, no, we all just want the same things. I'm sorry. No, we don't. I want us to, all be healthy and everything else. But am I willing to take people's children away from them? Am I willing to put people in prison or fine them for saying things I don't like? Am I willing to, force people to go to basically COVID concentration camps? No, I'm not. I'm not willing to do that under just about any circumstance. Am I willing to do that?
See, you kind of balked at the idea of this being caused or exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I don't know. I'm not convinced that this has, origins that stem back further. I would love if, it'd been amazing if we were to have the foresight to be able to do like polls every couple of months, every 6 months, kind of judging this stuff from before COVID up and through to where we are now, and kind of compare and be able to analyze that data and see, like, has COVID driven these people insane? And I think that that's a pretty decent hypothesis. In fact, I am not as convinced as you. I think that COVID did cause a lot of this. I bet if you were to run numbers like this, even in the early stages of COVID, that or maybe just prior to it or something like that, that you would see these numbers be dramatically lower than where they are today.
One of the things that I would like to, we actually did ask people as part of our socialism and authoritarianism type questions from what we did a couple years back about climate change.
Yeah.
And we did ask people questions about that. And would you be willing to do various things to stop climate change? And some of those were authoritarian and some of those were just kind of crazy, but not necessarily authoritarian. And so I do wonder what that information shows.
Yeah.
And that might be a little bit in line with what you said, but even that really wasn't totally the same thing. I agree with you that, you know, there's something particularly terrifying about COVID to a lot of people that makes them more susceptible to this. But my point is, I think that these people would have answered these questions in the same way 10 years ago if you had just presented them with a different crisis.
Right.
And that it's basically just substitute in a crisis that's big enough and they will become authoritarian, and that there's this streak in them. Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, if there's no crisis going on, do they want to take people's kids away and lock people away for saying things on Twitter? No. But if you give them a crisis big enough, then yes, they will do it every single time, no matter what the crisis is, which is pretty terrifying for a variety of reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is, what makes a crisis a crisis? Is it in fact a crisis? I'm not even making a commentary about COVID. I'm just saying, in general, what makes a crisis a crisis? It's a subjective thing. I mean, isn't it? It's not objectively a crisis. In most cases, it's subjective.
Sure.
This is an opinion when it becomes a crisis level versus not a crisis level, right? Even COVID, this is a good example, right? If you were living during the Black Death of the Middle Ages or whatever, you wouldn't think that COVID's a crisis compared to that. That would not be your opinion, right? But if you're living in COVID times, this is all you've ever known, this seems like a crisis. So it's all a subjective term.
So to me,
a crisis can be anything. That's the thing that scares me, is a crisis can be anything. It's about what people believe. And that's the scary part.
See, another thing that I think kind of are exacerbating these numbers, and again, this is all theory, I have no idea. But I think that, like, you know, obviously COVID has driven people crazy. Or I think that's part of the theory. But I also think that there's an element of just like this like separating of the two halves of this country, the left and the right. And I think that a lot of these questions, people are answering them as like, these are questions, theoretical questions about their political opponents, right? So it's like, I think a lot, like, the mindset of some of these people answering yes to these questions are like, how can I punish my political opponent? And I think that has gotten so much crazier since like the Trump era, that I think that that's what's driving a lot of this as well. So
yeah,
again,
you know, I think you're probably right, and I think that there probably is, to some extent, a very disturbing, probably both sides. Both Republicans and Democrats probably do have a little bit of authoritarianism in them, but it depends on the issue that's causing the crisis. To some degree, that's probably true. And if this whole thing had happened under a different set of circumstances, maybe things would be a little bit reversed, because I do think that opinions are largely driven by politics and people wanting the other side to lose, right? And so if Donald Trump had come right out of the gates and had been super authoritarian, if that was his reaction to COVID, his reaction to COVID was, I am going to imprison people that say anything bad about the vaccine. I'm going to throw people in concentration camps. And I'm going to, you know, I'm going to take kids away from people who don't get vaccinated. I have a feeling that if Donald Trump had done that right out of the gates, now granted, we didn't have a vaccine right out of the gates, but if we had, and he had done that right away, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that Democrats would have all of a sudden become the party of, you know, limited government.
I get what you're saying. I don't think that you would see a complete flip-flopping of the numbers.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think so either, because I do think that there is something about socialism in particular and hardcore progressivism, not your run-of-the-mill, you know, left-leaning Democrat, but the people who are really hardcore Democrats, that is a little more authoritarian. I think that that's true, and this comes out in these polls. But I also think that there is some politics involved in this too, and that you can't really deny that. I mean, Democrats were the ones questioning the vaccine initially. Remember that? They were the ones saying, I'm not sure I would take the vaccine. You have
Kamala Harris.
She said the vice president of the United States was basically questioning whether she would take the vaccine. Why? Because Donald Trump was president, and she didn't trust his experts, which are now her experts. None of those people are gone. They're all the same freaking people. So you have to admit, there is a degree of that exists within these questions that you can't deny. But at the same time, I agree that there is something about liberalism, hardcore progressivism, really, I think is the best way. Progressivism and socialism, and communism. There's something about those three parts of the collectivist sort of mindset that is more authoritarian. That you can justify
for the greater good,
people's
Justin.
rights.
It's for the greater good.
Right.
All right. Well, I think I'm very curious to see kind of what the people that are listening to this, that are watching the show's reactions are to some of these numbers. Do you have any theories on the stuff that we were theorizing on? Leave it in the comments. We'll take a look at those for sure, and maybe bring it up on the next episode if there's any interesting insights there. But Justin, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. You got any last words of wisdom? Anything you want to get off your chest before we sign off?
Go buy the book.
Yeah.
The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of 21st Century Fascism by Glenn Beck and some guy named Justin Haskins. And you can buy it, the Kindle version, right now, right this second. You don't have to wait 2 months to get your copy in the mail. I do have a physical copy. It's right over my shoulder here. It's awesome. So I do think you should eventually buy the physical copy. But while you wait, buy the digital copy. Buy the digital copy. It's an amazing book. You don't want to be left out. Buy the copy now on Amazon.com.
Yeah, and Justin, he's got his name on the front cover, but some people say that the title page is a more prestigious area to have your name.
You're gonna have to zoom it in a little more for us
and
to
you can see right here, if it's not blurred, that yep, yours truly is listed there as a contributor. And I will point out that the font size of our names on this title page are identical, so keep that in mind.
They do seem identical.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Justin and Donald Save America. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us. It'd be great. Leave a comment, hit that like button, share this content, all things that you can do to help us get in front of more eyes. If you want to see more content like this, you could always go to Stopping Socialism TV or stoppingsocialism.com, where you can find a whole bunch of great content, and also follow us on different social medias, whether it's Stopping Socialism on Facebook or Twitter or Getter or something like that. If you look hard enough, you will find us. Justin, where can the fine people find you?
Justin T. Haskins on Facebook, Socialist Twitter, Parler, Getter, and of course on YouTube at Stopping Socialism TV and Justin and Donald Save America.
That is right. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.